Hey, I'm Cary, CEO of Greenomix, and today we're going to be doing a quick breakdown of the voluntary carbon market's joint policy statement and principles issued by the White House and endorsed by several other federal agencies in the United States in May. And the reason we're going to be talking about this today is because it's an important demand signal to showcase that there is increasing support across both government, private sector, and the NGO community for the voluntary carbon market, with some important exceptions and quality criteria that we're going to be talking about today. So, first of all, what is this joint policy statement? Is it law? Is it regulations? No, it's not. It's guidance that has been put together with a fairly significant working group across the United States federal government and is ultimately endorsed or signed by the Treasury Secretary, the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, Department of Energy, as well as a number of other notable advisors to the president in this space. And so, the voluntary carbon market is a field that has attracted both considerable promise and support as a result of that, but also criticism over the course of the last couple of years. And this guidance document is intended to help us solidify a set of principles that will guide the establishment of quality criteria across the voluntary carbon market. But it could also be the foundation for future regulations in this space. We don't know yet. What we do know is that these principles are fairly consistent with existing market proposals regarding how to establish key quality criteria, including those put forward by the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market last year and the year before that. So let's take a look at what these principles actually are. The first principle is that carbon credits and the activities that generate them should meet credible atmospheric integrity standards and represent real decarbonization. So essentially what that means is that the carbon credits must actually achieve the carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas reductions, avoidances, or removals that the credits represent. The guidance goes on to kind of go through some fairly high-level explanation of what it is that you look at to actually establish whether these credits are real. And for those involved in the voluntary carbon market, there's nothing particularly new here. However, if you are new to the voluntary carbon market and want to learn more, reading this principle in more detail is a good place to learn more about this sector. The second principle is that credit-generating activities, think carbon projects like conservation or clean energy developments, should avoid environmental and social harm and should, where applicable, support co-benefits and transparent and inclusive benefits sharing. So the idea here is what is talked about in economic terms as Pareto efficiency. How can you make everyone as well off as possible without diminishing the benefits that or causing harm to anyone involved in the project, and that can range from local communities that are involved in these projects to the overall environmental impacts associated with the carbon projects on a global scale. And it goes farther than just saying avoid harm. It also endorses the need for co-benefits and benefits sharing. Think programs that provide economic opportunities for low-income people across the world and make sure that the communities where these carbon projects are located see the revenue that these projects bring in. And that's, of course, an important part of equitable climate action as a general matter. The third principle is that corporate buyers that use credits, credit users, should prioritize emissions reductions within their own value chains. This is a fairly well-established concept today, but it is, I think, the source of a lot of controversy in the voluntary carbon market. One of the big allegations against the VCM is that even if the carbon credits work, they may disincentivize companies from actually reducing their own emissions, which we know has to be done in order to achieve our global climate objectives. However, the research has shown that really the opposite is true. Companies which buy carbon credits are about 3 times more likely to invest in supply chain decarbonization and invest more in it if they do so. And so, this principle, I think, is an important one. The good news is that I think the era of companies being able to use carbon credits in lieu of other important forms of climate action is coming to an end. I think everyone from the voluntary side to the compliance side is seeing that carbon credits need to be a complement as opposed to a substitute for direct supply chain emissions reductions across scope 1, 2, and 3, being direct emissions, energy, and then down your supply chain. But that is a fairly high-level explanation of how that works here. We will dive into that in more detail in future videos. The fourth principle is that credit users should publicly disclose the nature of purchased and retired credits. And the idea here is that if a company uses carbon credits, they need to let the public know how those credits were used, where they were sourced from, the precise nature of how they were used. Did they contribute to a company-wide net zero goal? Were they used to offset emissions for a particular product line that's marketed as net zero or something like that? Basically, the idea is in order for us to assess as a society whether we are making the progress we need to make on climate change, we need publicly available data on the way that carbon credits are used. And I'm going to put a pin in the rest of that thought because the next principle is directly relevant, which is public claims by credit users should accurately reflect the climate impact of retired credits and should only rely on credits that meet high integrity standards. And so what this is saying is that if a company says we are net zero, we are climate neutral, or some third-party certified version of that, it's going to be really important that the use of those credits need to line up with an accurate claim that is made on the basis of those credits, or at least in part on the basis of those credits. And that if carbon credits are used for claims like that, net zero, climate neutral, those credits need to meet high integrity standards. Think back before, these are the high integrity principles. The emissions reductions have to be real, verifiable, measurable, etc. And so the idea between 4 and 5 is that the public is given the access to the information to evaluate the quality of the credits and the use of the credits. And then the claims made on the basis of those credits need to be aligned with sound science and climate policy. Great. So, sixth principle, market participants should contribute to efforts that improve market integrity. This is really paramount. I think the important thing to understand about the voluntary carbon market is that it is both flawed, but deeply necessary and a very powerful tool to help achieve our global climate goals. And so we do not have the luxury, with only 6 years remaining to cut global emissions in half in order to meet Paris Agreement goals. We don't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect to be developed. We need to provide resources for incredibly important, but perhaps not perfect solutions, such as those that are supported by the voluntary carbon market. And then additionally, we need to be continuously investing in the improvement of this market in order to achieve better climate outcomes and social outcomes for everyone involved, directly or indirectly. And that's what we're doing at Greenomix, by the way. We provide a market-leading carbon credit assurance product called the Carbon Guarantee. You can learn more about that on our website, but I am going to be focusing on the VCM joint policy statement in this video. And then the final principle is that policymakers and market participants should facilitate efficient market participation and seek to lower transaction costs. And this is, I think, a lot more important than many people may think at a first glance. The idea here is that participating in the voluntary carbon market is too expensive today. I've been a voluntary carbon market attorney. I've been a consultant in this space. And I think that there's a lot of really good work being done, but much of that work is too expensive for most parties to get involved. And the nature of this principle is that everyone involved in the market needs to be lowering the barriers to participation while simultaneously doing what they can to increase the overall integrity of this market as identified in the previous principles. And with that, hopefully what can be achieved is a market where there is a significant financial incentive for everyone from low-income communities to small businesses to international enterprises, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 global companies, to allocate funding efficiently for the use of global climate mitigation and do so in a way that meets principles of equity and economic empowerment. Now, there's a lot of work to do in this market, and I'm going to wrap up this video here. But I think the last thing I'm going to say is just a couple things that aren't mentioned in these principles. The first of which is that while the principles do acknowledge the Paris Agreement in the introductory statements, there is no guidance regarding whether the use of voluntary carbon credits need to be aligned with either the Paris Agreement generally or the use of corresponding adjustments for the international trade of emissions outcomes. That's a complicated area. There's a lot of disagreement on it today. There is also not any guidance on whether emissions reductions versus removals are the what companies should be using. The market has trended, I believe, pretty heavily towards supporting emissions carbon removals as opposed to avoidances. Think sucking carbon out of the atmosphere as opposed to doing things like clean energy or conservation of forests that reduce the emissions that go into the atmosphere in the first place. My opinion is that they're both critically necessary, and if you read the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, policy statements regarding what does the science tell us that policymakers from government to business need to know, what you'll see in extremely clear and frankly stark terms is that we require both the reduction of greenhouse gases as well as the removal of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere to have any shot at keeping global atmospheric temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius. So I think that the market's current fixation on carbon removals will ultimately, I think, give way to a more comprehensive view of overall quality evaluation. But at the moment, that is what the market is trending towards. And it appears here that the Biden administration is not wading into that debate. So again, thanks for watching. My name's Cary. I'm the CEO of Greenomix. And please like and subscribe. Hope to see you soon. Thanks.